Gray Yun had beaten every fighter who came at him head-on. But the enemies gathering now were a different breed. They didn't want to punch him. They wanted to use him, control him, crush him from the shadows through schemes and manipulation. This episode is about the web tightening around Gray Yun, and the new kind of predator who spins it, not a brawler, but a schemer. It opened with another challenger, a cocky blonde from Class 1, sizing Gray up with contempt. "Class 5 champ," he sneered. "Better stop acting cocky over taking a pushover like Colton. Before one of us recovers to pay the other a visit." It was the same old song, another fighter measuring the small quiet boy and finding him wanting. But this one carried a threat that reached beyond the schoolyard, a promise of retaliation from the larger world of fighters Gray had unknowingly stirred up. And the story took a moment to show just how completely Gray had broken the old order. Because Colton Choi, once the feared king of the classroom, was now a shadow of himself. Colton Choi, always acting cocky, someone remembered from the cafeteria. And then the reality, the boy who had once ruled through fear now sat subservient and small, flinching at his betters. I just found it absurd, Gray reflected, that Colton Choi, who acted like a king in our classroom, was acting so subservient. That is the mark Gray Yun leaves. He doesn't just defeat a bully. He dismantles them so thoroughly that the whole hierarchy reshuffles around the void. And into that void, new predators were already moving. The most dangerous of them was a Class 1 student named Teddy Jean. And Teddy Jean was not a fighter. He was a manipulator, a boy who collected information and used people like tools. "You said you know a lot about the fighters here, right?" he pressed an informant. "Yeah, I know all about most of them." He was building a map of the school's power structure, cataloging every fighter, every weakness, every angle. And when he heard about Gray, the maniac from Class 5 who toppled Colton, he saw not a threat but an opportunity. So easy to control, Teddy thought of the pieces he was arranging. "He'll serve as a great tool for me. I should crush Gray and Ben while I have the momentum." Because Teddy Jin's ambition was simple and cold, use the chaos Gray had created to seize power for himself, and remove both Gray Yun and Ben Park in the process. This is what makes weak heroes so much richer than a simple fighting story. Because the higher Gray climbs, the more he attracts enemies who don't fight fair, don't fight at all in the traditional sense. Teddy Jean doesn't want to trade punches. He wants to pull strings, to turn people against each other, to win without ever risking his own body. He is a smaller, hungrier version of the manipulators circling the story, the kind of predator who thrives on other people's violence while keeping his own hands clean. Meanwhile, the story checked in on Ben Park, and found him hiding. Because Ben, humiliated twice by Gray, had holed up at a pool hall, avoiding everyone, including the person now hunting him hardest, Philip Kim. "Welcome to our establishment," the pretty part-timer greeted him. "Just me," Ben said, settling in, trying to disappear into the quiet. "My party will be here soon." But Ben's phone would not let him rest. Ring. 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 Philip Kim, the caller ID read, again and again and again. Ring. 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 Because Philip Kim, the rich manipulator from the earlier chapters, wanted Ben, and Philip Kim was not a patient man. Ben ignored the calls, and the ignoring itself was telling. "Fuck, I'm so off today," he muttered, watching the phone light up over and over. "I don't feel like it. It's been 3 hours." He was avoiding Philip deliberately, and that avoidance said everything about the kind of person Philip Kim was. Because you don't dodge a friend's calls for 3 hours. You dodge a predators. Ben Park, himself a scheming coward, was afraid of getting tangled in Philip Kim's web, and with good reason. Ring. 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 The phone screamed. On, a small relentless symbol of how these manipulators pull people into their orbit whether they want to come or not. And then the pool hall erupted. Because Ben Park could not sit quietly anywhere for long without trouble finding him. A thug loomed over him, spoiling for a fight. The hell's with this guy, the thug sneered. You waiting on your buddies? Acting cocky 'cause you have the numbers on your side? Who do you think you are? Get up, you joke. Let's talk about it, huh? It was the same predatory logic that ran through the whole school world: find someone who looks vulnerable, corner them, dominate them. But then the thug paused, something flickering across his face. His face is oddly familiar, he thought, a beat too late. Because the person he'd chosen to threaten was not the easy mark he assumed. Kayak. Wish. Wham. Crack. In an explosion of violence, the confrontation flipped, the aggressor suddenly on the receiving end of a beating he never saw coming. This motherfucker right here, a voice growled, raining down blows. Boom. Boom. Goop. And when it was over, the victor looked down at his broken opponent with a lazy, dangerous smile. You just have so much shit to say, he said. It's a recurring rhythm in Weak Hero, the predator who picks the wrong prey, the confident aggressor who discovers, too late, that the person in front of him is far more dangerous than he looks. The whole school is a food chain, and everyone keeps misjudging where they sit on it. This episode is a web-building chapter, and that's exactly its purpose. Because Weak Hero is not just about individual fights. It's about the ecosystem of violence and manipulation that Gray Yun has stumbled into, and how his very existence keeps drawing more and more players toward a collision. Teddy Jean schemes to control the school and crush Gray and Ben. Philip Kim hunts Ben relentlessly through a ringing phone. The Class 1 fighters circle, waiting for their chance. Colton lies broken, a warning of what happens to those who cross the quiet boy. And Ben Park, caught between all of them, throws punches in a pool hall just to stay afloat. And through all of it, Gray Yun sits at the center, mostly unaware of how many threads are being spun around him. He wanted peace. He wanted to be left alone. He got a moment of it, a quiet classroom, a nap at his desk. But peace was always temporary, because the world he lives in cannot leave a strong person alone. Every fighter he beats, every bully he breaks, every rumor that spreads about the maniac from Class 5, all of it feeds the machine, and the machine keeps producing new enemies. The brawlers were dangerous, but at least they came at him openly. The schemers, Teddy Jean, Philip Kim, are worse, because they fight from the shadows, through other people, in ways Gray can't simply punch his way out of. That is the escalation Weak Hero is building toward. The early fights were about strength and will, and Gray won them because he had more of both than anyone expected. But the coming battles will be about something harder to fight: manipulation, information, money, the cold cruelty of people who use others as weapons. Teddy Jean wants to control the school like a game board. Philip Kim wants to own everyone through fear and wealth. And Gray Yun, the boy who just wants to study in peace, is the peace they all keep reaching for, because a fighter that dangerous is too valuable to ignore and too threatening to leave alone. The web is nearly complete now. The schemers have identified their target. The phone keeps ringing. The fighters keep circling. And somewhere in the middle of it, Gray Yun keeps doing the only thing he knows how to do, refusing to be a victim, refusing to lose, refusing to look away when the strong crush the weak. He doesn't know yet how many people are plotting his downfall. He doesn't know that the next war won't be won with fists. But he'll learn, the hard way, as he always does. And when the schemes finally close in around him, the weak hero will have to become something more than a fighter to survive them. Gray Yun had broken the old order of Unjang Hai, and into the vacuum rushed a new kind of enemy, manipulators like Teddy Jean who fight through others, predators like Philip Kim who hunt through relentless pressure, schemers who see the chaos Gray created as a ladder to climb. The brawls were only the beginning. Now the real game, the game of control and manipulation and cold calculation, was tightening around the quiet boy who wanted nothing but peace. Colton lay broken. Ben Park hid and bled. The phone kept ringing. And the web kept closing. Gray Yun's story was only getting started, and the most dangerous enemies were the ones he couldn't see coming. Every fighter in Weak Hero looks unbreakable from the outside. But underneath the swagger and the violence, almost all of them are carrying a wound. This episode pulls back the curtain on two of them, Philip Kim, the rich manipulator whose ambition has no bottom, and Alex So, the fearless fighter who was broken so badly a year ago that he spent every day since as a shadow of himself. It's a chapter about the trauma hiding behind the tough exterior. First, the schemer. Because Philip Kim had finally lured Ben Park to the pool hall, and the two of them sat down to plot. Philip, we've learned, is not a fighter at heart. He is a strategist, a boy who climbs through money and manipulation, and his ambition burned cold and clear. I met Donald not too late back in middle school, he reflected on his own rise. It cost me a lot of time, breaking up the existing forces, becoming number one. My plan to reach the top will be affected if I waste any more time. Every second was a calculation to Philip Kim, every person a piece to be moved. And his current target was simple, conquer Unjang Hai, and use it as his ticket into the Yangdungpo Union, the larger network of fighters that ruled the district. You know who I am, Philip said, radiating confidence. Philip fucking Kim. Because he had already mapped the whole thing out. He'd been calculating the best route into the Union, and he knew that conquering Unjang would get him in instantly. All he had to do was beat Ben Park's forces and seize the school. And Philip was the kind of person who never let a chance like that slip away. The money, the maneuvering, the manipulation, all of it bent toward a single goal, power, and the status that came with it. In the end, he thought, I've got nothing to lose here. That was Philip Kim's terrifying advantage. A man with nothing to lose, and everything to gain, who fought with money instead of fists and never once put himself at risk. But the heart of this episode belonged to someone else entirely, Alex So. Because while Philip schemed, the Yusun High fighters had come hunting, and among them was a monster named Jimmy Bay, backed by the shadow of Wolf Kume, an insurmountable mountain of a fighter. And when they cornered Alex So, the story finally revealed the wound he'd been hiding behind his wild grin all along. Because a year ago, Alex So had been different. He had been fearless. Yeah, nice try sticking up for your buddy, Jimmy Bay sneered as he beat him down. It does put a smile on my face. That idiot not getting the situation and acting up. It's like I'm looking at you from last year, Alex So. You were so feisty and defiant then, challenging me fearlessly. And there it was, the ghost of who Alex used to be. A year ago, Alex So had stood up to these monsters without fear, had challenged them head-on, had refused to back down. And it had destroyed him. "What made you become such a bitch?" Jimmy Bay taunted. Because whatever happened in that fight a year ago had broken something in Alex so that never healed. We learn the shape of it through Alex's own memory. The reason that incident escalated into madness, he thought, was because I couldn't control my hot-headed temper and acted foolishly. A year ago, his defiance had spiraled into a violence so brutal it left a permanent scar on his spirit. The fearless boy who challenged mountains had been ground down into someone who flinched, who hesitated, who carried the trauma of that day like a weight he could never set down. This is the same wound the whole series keeps circling. The way violence doesn't just hurt the body, it rewires the mind, turning brave people into frightened ones, leaving marks that outlast every bruise. And yet, in this moment, Alex so found something worth being brave for again. Because his friend Ben Park was in danger, and Alex could not bear to let someone he cared about get hurt because of him. I should end this with me, he resolved. I can't have Ben get hurt because of me again. It's a quietly heroic decision from a broken boy. Alex knew he couldn't win. He knew. Jimmy Bay was a monster, that nobody could handle Jimmy Bay once he went apeshit, that pissing off Jimmy Bay meant pissing off the entire union. And he stepped up anyway. Just this once, he thought. I'll have to take this mad dog Jimmy Bay on my own. Not because he thought he could beat him, but because taking the beating himself meant sparing his friend. You alright? Someone asked him. And even the people watching recognized what Alex was doing. Good decision on Alex So's part, they murmured, though there was pity in it. Because everyone knew how this would end. Nobody can handle Jimmy Bay once he goes apeshit like that, they said. But Alex had made his choice. And here Jimmy Bay, cruel to the core, twisted the knife. This isn't like you at all, he taunted. You even hit first against Jack Kong a few days ago, right? Because Alex So had been fighting more recklessly lately, and Jimmy Bay had figured out why. It couldn't be because, he sneered, Ben, that fucker, isn't by your side, huh? He'd found the wound and pressed on it. Alex So's courage, his recklessness, was tied to protecting the people he cared about, and Jimmy Bay mocked him for it. Oh my, Jimmy Bay laughed. Can you even call yourself a man acting like that? Whap. He struck Alex again, relishing it. I dare you to act up like you did that time, you pussy. Because Jimmy Bay wanted Alex to break, wanted to see the fearless fighter from a year ago crushed all over again. And Alex So, bloodied and outmatched, took the beating rather than let Ben get hurt. Whomp. Blow after blow, he stood his ground, protecting a friend, paying with his own body for the crime of caring about someone in a world that punishes caring. This is what makes weak hero hit so hard. Because it refuses to let its fighters be simple. Jimmy Bay is a monster, yes, but he's a monster who understands people well enough to find their deepest wounds. Alex So is tough and wild and dangerous, but underneath it he's a traumatized boy still haunted by a beating a year ago, someone who fights recklessly only when the people he loves are on the line. Even Philip Kim, for all his cold confidence, is driven by a hunger for status that suggests its own kind of emptiness. Nobody in this world is just strong. They're all carrying something, and the violence keeps digging it back up. And it draws the connection to Gray Yun without him even being present. Because Alex So is, in many ways, a mirror of Gray. Both are fighters who don't want to fight for glory. Both are drawn into violence to protect others. Both carry trauma that shapes everything they do. The difference is where they've ended up. Gray Yun channeled his wound into an unbreakable will, a vow to never lose. Alex So's wound broke him, left him hesitant and haunted, a fearless boy turned careful. Two versions of the same kind of person, shaped differently by the blows life dealt them. And watching Alex take a beating to protect Ben, you can't help but see the road Gray might have walked if his own wound had crushed him instead of hardening him. Meanwhile, Philip Kim's web kept spinning in the background, patient and cold. Because while Alex bled to protect his friend, Philip was calculating routes into the Union, moving Ben Park like a chess piece, plotting to conquer Unjang without ever risking a scratch. That is the cruel hierarchy of this world laid bare in a single episode. At the bottom, fighters like Alex So take brutal beatings for the people they love. In the middle, monsters like Jimmy Bay dole out those beatings for sport and status. And at the top, schemers like Philip Kim orchestrate the whole thing from a safe distance, profiting off violence they never have to feel. Alex So stood in that pool hall, bloodied and beaten, refusing to let Ben Park pay for his mistakes, carrying the ghost of the fearless boy he used to be. Jimmy Bay loomed over him, cruel and gleeful, backed by the mountain of Wolf Kume and the whole weight of the Yangdongpo Union. And Philip Kim schemed in the corner, seeing all of it as pieces on a board he was slowly, coldly arranging. The war for Unjang Hai was taking shape, and it would not be a simple fight of fists. It would be a collision of broken people, ruthless schemers, and monsters, all circling closer to the quiet boy at the center of it all. Gray Yun wasn't in this episode. But everything in it was moving toward him. The schemers plotting his downfall. The Yusun High monsters testing the district's fighters. The broken boys taking beatings to protect what little they had left. And soon, all of it would crash together, and the weak hero would have to face not just the strong, but the traumatized, the ruthless, and the cruel. Alex So had made his stand for a friend, and paid for it in blood. Philip Kim had laid his plans, cold and confident. And the storm gathering over Unjang Hai grew darker with every passing episode. Gray Yun's story was only getting started, and the wounds these fighters carried were about to become the battleground. Everyone kept asking how a boy as small and unremarkable as Gray Yun could keep winning against fighters twice his size. In this episode, Gray finally answers the question himself, in 3 simple words that unlock his entire character. His secret isn't strength. It isn't talent. It's something far more ordinary, and far more powerful. He studies ahead. But first, the violence had to run its course. Alex So was still taking his beating. Jimmy Bay had cornered him, and Alex, refusing to let his friend Ben Park get hurt, absorbed blow after blow to keep the monster's attention on himself. Whap. Womp. Cuff. Kararha. That one really connected, Jimmy laughed, cruel and gleeful. You damn bullies, a bystander muttered, watching the pack tear into a single boy. And through it all, Alex stood his ground, scared but unmoving, because moving meant leaving Ben exposed. I see that you're clearly too scared to even move, Jimmy sneered. But that won't change a thing. 'Cause I'm gonna hunt down Ben Park and crush him too, soon after this. The beating was never really about Alex. It was a message, a promise, that the Yusun High monsters were coming for everyone. And it turned out Alex's sacrifice had a purpose beyond raw courage. Was it your plan all along, someone realized, to just wait it out and take it so things wouldn't escalate? Because Alex for all his hot-headed history, had chosen to endure the beating deliberately, to keep the violence contained, to stop it from spiraling into the kind of madness that had broken him a year before. It was a painful, self-sacrificing kind of wisdom, a fighter choosing to lose so that the people around him wouldn't lose more. Too bad all that beating was for nothing, Jimmy taunted. But it wasn't for nothing. It was Alex protecting the only thing he had left to protect. And then a heavier name entered the picture. Because as the beating wound down, a new figure loomed on the horizon, a fighter whose reputation dwarfed even Jimmy Bay's. Donald Na, himself. The mention of that name changed the air. "Alright, let Jack know about this," someone said. "I'll be there right away." Because the district's fighters were all connected, all ranked, all circling in a hierarchy that stretched far beyond Unjang High, and Donald Na sat somewhere near the top of it. "Tell Ben Park all about it," Jimmy said. "That I'll be coming for him soon." The war was widening, drawing in bigger and bigger players, and all of it was rolling slowly toward the quiet boy who wanted no part of any of it. Because then the episode returned to Gray Yun, and to something completely different, peace. Tap. Tap. Sweep. Sweep. Gray stood alone in an empty classroom, cleaning, and it was clear this was where he felt most himself. "I sort out my thoughts in this empty classroom," he reflected. "I like the empty classroom. I feel like my head is gonna explode with all the things I've been thinking about." In a world of constant violence and scheming, this small quiet ritual, sweeping a silent room in the early morning, was Gray's refuge. It's a gentle, human beat, and it tells you everything about what Gray actually wants, not power, not fear, just a quiet space to think. And in that quiet, a friendship was growing. Because a kind classmate had started coming to school early too, doing the cleaning duty so Gray could rest, looking out for the boy everyone else feared. "He's already here," the classmate would marvel, arriving to find Gray already there. "And he's already finished cleaning." "I'm sorry, I'll be here even earlier tomorrow," the classmate offered. "That's fine," Gray said. It's a small, warm thing, two boys negotiating who gets to clean the classroom, but for Gray Yun, who has spent his whole life as an island, this ordinary friendliness is precious. Slowly, quietly, he was being drawn into something he'd never really had, a normal connection with another person. But peace never lasts long in Weak Hero, and the classmate had a warning to deliver, about a name that was becoming a threat, Teddy Jean. And the story he told was chilling. Because Teddy Jean was an infamous maniac from Songil Middle School. He beat a teacher once, and got worse after being suspended for it. And the way he bullies other students, the classmate said, is on another level. Like, they're the type that gets pleasure out of the act. That's the key detail. Teddy Jean didn't hurt people for status or territory or pride. He hurt them because he enjoyed it. There's a sizable bunch of Songil students, the classmate explained, who transferred or altogether quit school because of Teddy Jean. The guy's on a different level than Colton Choi or Evan Yu. Seriously, you should do everything not to get tied up with him. A sadist who drives his victims out of school entirely. That is a darker kind of villain than Gray has faced so far. The brawlers wanted to win. The schemers wanted power. But Teddy Jean just wants to cause suffering, and he's good at it, methodical about it, pleased by it. He represents the cruelty at the very bottom of this world, the pure predatory joy of hurting the weak. And now he had set his sights on Unjang, and on Gray Yun. But here is where the episode delivers its real gift, the moment that defines Gray Yun more than any fight. Because the classmate, curious about this strange boy, finally asked him something personal. You mind if I ask you something too, he said. You always come to school so early, even when you're not on duty. Why do you do that? And Gray gave an answer so simple it's almost anticlimactic, until you understand what it really means. To study ahead, he said. Study ahead, the classmate repeated, not quite getting it. And Gray explained. This right here is what gives me an edge. Studying ahead. On every given situation. Studying ahead on every given situation. That is the entire secret of Gray Yun, laid bare in a single line. Because Gray is not the strongest. He is not the fastest. He was not born with a fighter's gift. What he has is preparation. He studies ahead. He reads every situation before it happens. He analyzes his enemies, maps their weaknesses, anticipates their moves, prepares for every possibility in advance. When he threw dirt in a bully's eyes, that wasn't instinct, it was a plan. When he took out the biggest fighter first, that wasn't luck, it was analysis. When he stood calm against 5 opponents, that calm came from having already thought through the fight before it began. Gray Yun wins because he does the work no one else is willing to do. He studies ahead. And that phrase means so much more than schoolwork. It's his entire philosophy of survival. In a world where the strong crush the weak, Gray Yun, who is physically weak, found the one edge available to someone without natural power. He outthinks everyone. He prepares while others coast. He plans while others react. He treats every fight, every confrontation, every situation, like an exam he refuses to fail, studying it in advance until he knows the answers before the questions are even asked. It's why he comes to school early to a quiet classroom. It's why he wins. It's why the biggest fighters keep underestimating him and keep losing. They see a scrawny kid. They don't see the hours of preparation, the relentless analysis, the mind that has already read the situation 10 moves deep. This is what makes Gray Yun such an inspiring and unusual hero. Because he tells us, in the plainest possible terms, that talent is not the only path to victory. He is living proof that preparation beats natural gifts, that the person who studies ahead can defeat the person who was simply born stronger. Every fighter who has ever faced Gray thought his size made him weak. And every one of them learned that a prepared mind is more dangerous than any muscle. He doesn't have Yu Junghyuk's 5-minute genius. He has something harder won and, in its own way, more admirable, the discipline to do the work, over and over, until the impossible becomes routine. And so, even as the monsters gathered, even as Jimmy Bay threatened and Donald Na loomed and Teddy Jean brought his sadistic cruelty toward Eun-jang, Gray Yun prepared. He swept his quiet classroom. He studied ahead. He gathered information about Teddy Jean, the sadist who drove children out of school, because knowing your enemy is the first step of studying ahead. He was building, quietly and methodically, the edge that would let a weak boy survive a war of the strong. While his enemies relied on strength and cruelty and numbers, Gray relied on the one thing none of them bothered to cultivate, relentless, disciplined preparation. Alex So had taken his beating to protect a friend, carrying his old trauma with grim courage. The Yusun High monsters were closing in, and Donald Na's name promised the war would only grow larger. Teddy Jean, the sadist who hurt for pleasure, was setting his sights on Eun-jang. And in the middle of it all, a small quiet boy swept an empty classroom, made a tentative friend, and quietly explained the secret that made him unbeatable: he studies ahead. The storm was gathering around Gray Yun, darker and more dangerous with every episode. But Gray Yun does not meet storms unprepared. He studies them first. And when the sadist and the monsters and the schemers finally came for him, they would find that the weak hero had already read the whole situation, 10 moves deep, and was waiting. His story was only getting started. Weak hero has shown us brawlers and schemers. But this episode introduces its cruelest villain yet, a boy who doesn't hurt people for power or pride, but for pure entertainment. Teddy Jean doesn't just beat his victims. He forces them to hurt others, turning frightened kids into weapons, savoring their terror. And when he sent one trembling boy to mark Gray Yun as a target, the story revealed something profound about how Gray sees the difference between the coerced and the willing. Teddy Jean announced himself with pure contempt. At the morning assembly, while the principal droned on about the new semester, Teddy Jean yawned loudly, mockingly, right in front of everyone. "How can you even go on about arbitrary bullshit for over 30 minutes, he sneered. And when the principal, flustered, cut the sermon short, Teddy Jean turned his irritation on a helpless target. Because that is Teddy Jean's nature, any inconvenience, any boredom, any small frustration, becomes an excuse to make someone suffer. "God damn it," he complained. "Can't we catch a break after suffering through the principal's never-ending sermon?" And he chose a victim to punish for it. "This is your punishment," he said, tormenting a kid, for the old man's sermon. Cruelty without reason, cruelty as reflex, cruelty for its own sake. And then Teddy Jean did the thing that makes him so uniquely monstrous. He didn't just hurt people himself. He forced his victims to hurt others. He grabbed a terrified boy and gave him a sadistic assignment. "You see that kid over there," he said, pointing out Gray Yun, the one who's next to be the top dog of Class 5. "Wish." He handed the trembling boy a marker. "You will take this marker, and draw a nice big X on his back and return." And he set cruel terms. "I want each stroke to be at least 10 inches, he said. "If you don't make the length requirement, I'll take that as a mission failure. And you'll be sentenced to a fiery beating." A game, to Teddy Jean. A helpless kid forced to deface a dangerous stranger, threatened with a beating if he failed, threatened with Gray's wrath if he succeeded. Trapped between two terrors for Teddy Jean's amusement. "But, I don't even know that kid," the boy pleaded, tears in his eyes. "Quit stalling and get it done already," Teddy snapped, "unless you really want to die." And so the terrified boy went, because he had no choice. He could actually kill me, the kid thought, running toward Gray with the marker clutched in his shaking hand. "'Cause that freak Teddy Jean is a real psycho. This is the true horror of Teddy Jean. He weaponizes fear itself, turning victims into perpetrators, forcing the weak to prey on each other while he watches and laughs. It's a cruelty that spreads, that corrupts, that makes everyone it touches complicit in their own torment." The boy approached Gray, trembling, and tried to mark his bag. Tap. Tap. Tremble. Tremble. But Gray Yun, who studies ahead, who reads every situation, caught him in the act. "Grab. What do you think you're doing on my bag?" Gray demanded. And the boy shattered. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." He broke down completely, weeping, terrified, a child crushed between two forces far bigger than himself. What's wrong with this kid, Gray thought, taken aback by the raw despair. And then he understood. "What class are you from?" he asked. "Class 1, the boy managed. And the pieces clicked into place. It's Teddy Jean, Gray realized. The sadist had sent this frightened boy to do his dirty work. And here is where weak hero shows the depth of Gray Yun's moral compass. Because Gray did not blame the crying boy. "I despise that son of a bitch, Teddy Jean," he thought. And he understood that the kid in front of him was not an enemy but another victim, coerced, terrified, given no real choice. "I had no other choice," the boy wept. I had no other choice. And Gray, who could easily have punished the boy for daring to mark him, saw the truth. This child had been forced, and forcing someone is a crime that belongs to the one who forces, not the one who obeys under threat. It's a moment of real compassion from a boy who is often cold and ruthless, and it reveals that Gray's harshness has a moral core. He hates the sadist. He pities the coerced. But weak hero is too honest to make Gray's morality simple, and the story adds a harder, more uncomfortable edge to it. Because Gray Yun has little patience for those who simply surrender to their oppressors without ever trying to fight back. Despicable lowlifes who think everything will improve, he reflects, if they just follow the orders of their oppressors without even trying to fight. I haven't a drop of pity for such idiots. Run away from reality, blaming others for ruining your life all you want. Not a single thing will change. It's a brutal philosophy, and it comes straight from Gray's own wound. Because Gray was once helpless. He knows what it is to be powerless, to be bullied, to have no choice. And out of that pain, he built a vow to never be that helpless again. So he holds a complicated view. He pities the coerced in the moment, but he despises the choice to stay a victim forever, to obey without resistance, to accept the boot on your neck as permanent. Fight back, his philosophy insists, or nothing will ever change. This tension is what makes Gray Yun such a rich character. He is compassionate and unforgiving at the same time. He understands why the frightened boy marked his bag, and he refuses to blame him for it. But he also believes, deep in his bones, that endless submission is its own kind of failure. It's a worldview forged in trauma, harsh and clear-eyed, born from a boy who decided that being weak was not the same as being helpless, and that the difference is whether you choose to fight. Meanwhile, the cruelty continued elsewhere, in a different key. Because Jimmy Bay was still beating Alex so, and the story lingered on the ugliness of it. Just by shoving your fist into a fallen competitor's face, the narration observed, look at your noggin bouncing around like a bobblehead. The hopelessness of a competitor who's completely accepted his impending fall. Whomp. Whack. Jimmy Bay wasn't just winning. He was establishing dominance, grinding a defeated fighter into the ground long after the fight was decided, because domination in this world isn't about victory, it's about spectacle, about making sure everyone knows their place. This is the perfect time to establish your dominance, he thought, savoring the cruelty. It's the same sadism as Teddy Jean, just wearing a different face, the powerful hurting the weak not because they have to, but because they can, and because it feels good to them. And the schemers kept moving in the background. We're still on for tonight, right? Philip Kim's people confirmed, their plan to conquer Unjiang inching forward. The web that had been tightening for episodes now drew closer to its snap. Teddy Jin's sadism. Philip Kim's scheming. Jimmy Bay's dominance. Donald Na's looming name. All of it converging, slowly and inevitably, on Unjiang High and the quiet boy at its center. And Gray Yun, at the end of it all, did what he always does. He studied. He named his enemies. Teddy Jean, he thought. Philip Kim. Filing them away, mapping the threats, preparing for the war he could feel gathering. Because Gray Yun does not wait for trouble to arrive. He studies ahead. He had just met Teddy Jin's cruelty secondhand, through a crying boy with a marker, and already he was analyzing it, understanding it, preparing for the moment it would come for him directly. The sadist who forces victims to hurt each other. The schemer who fights with money. Gray was reading them both, 10 moves deep, the way he reads everything. Teddy Jean had revealed himself as the cruelest kind of villain, a sadist who weaponizes fear and turns the weak against each other for sport. He had sent a terrified boy to mark Gray Yun as prey, and in catching that boy, Gray had shown both his compassion and his hard-edged philosophy, pity for the coerced, contempt for the endlessly submissive. Jimmy Bay ground Alex so into the dirt to establish his dominance. Philip Kim laid his plans for the night ahead. And the storm over Unjang grew darker still. But Gray Yun had already added the sadist and the schemer to his map, already begun to study the enemies closing in. He wanted peace. He got a marker on his bag and a crying boy and the name of a monster who hurt children for fun. And as always, the weak hero met it not with fear, but with preparation. His story was only getting started, and the cruelest villain yet had just stepped onto the board. Teddy Jean looked at Gray Yun and saw exactly what everyone else saw, a small, weak, scrawny target. A fun toy to torment slowly, to break piece by piece, for his own amusement. He had no idea he was making the same mistake that had destroyed every bully before him. This is the episode where the sadist and the weak hero finally begin their collision, and where a rare friendship gives Gray something worth protecting. It opened with warmth, which in weak hero always means something bad is coming. Because Gray Yun had found a real friend in Stephen On, the kind classmate who came early to clean, who looked out for the boy everyone else feared. And when Gray's bag was marked with that cruel X, it was Stephen who helped. The marker doesn't wash out easily, Stephen fretted. But I have experience with this kind of stuff. The miscellaneous knowledge I've accumulated from delivering meat for many years, he explained, might actually come in handy. It's a small, tender scene, two boys scrubbing a marker off a backpack, one of them offering the humble expertise of a working kid's life. For Gray Yun, who has spent his whole existence alone, this ordinary kindness is precious. Stephen On wasn't afraid of him. Stephen On just wanted to help. And in a world this cruel, that mattered. I'll make sure to come early tomorrow, Stephen promised. See you then. It was the kind of easy, unremarkable friendship most people take for granted. But Gray Yun is not most people, and he does not take it for granted. Slowly, quietly, he was letting someone in. And weak hero, being the story it is, was about to put that connection in the path of a monster. Meanwhile, the fallout from earlier violence lingered. Alex So had vanished after his beating, and his friends worried. He's really not home either, someone noted, trying to reach him. Come on, Alex. I'm so bored without that idiot around. Beneath the casual complaint was real concern, the fear that Alex So had been hurt worse than anyone wanted to admit. The violence in this world doesn't end when the fight does. It leaves people missing, broken, hiding their wounds. And the machine kept grinding forward. Then came Teddy Jean, and the episode revealed exactly how his twisted mind worked. Because Teddy Jean did not see Gray Yun as a threat. He saw him as entertainment. Jean thought that Gray Yun was no different than any of his former prey, the narration tells us. He thought of him as a target, not to battle head-on, but as a fun target to continuously mess with, to eventually break his spirit. This is the crucial detail about Teddy Jin's cruelty. He wasn't interested in a quick fight. He wanted to torment Gray slowly, to grind him down over time, to enjoy the process of breaking a person. This bag is just screaming loser at me, dude, he sneered, looking at Gray's marked backpack. Heh heh heh. To Teddy Jean, Gray was a plaything, and the fun was in the slow destruction. And we saw that cruelty in action, because Teddy Jean was already tormenting the punching bag kid, the same terrified boy he'd forced to mark Gray in the first place. He humiliated him, threw him around, played his sadistic games, all while an audience watched and did nothing. Teddy Jin's arrogance and ego filled the hallway, the casual confidence of a predator who has never once faced consequences. He beat a teacher and got worse for it. He drove children out of school. And no one had ever made him pay. That is the kind of monster who believes he is untouchable, and untouchable monsters are exactly the kind Gray Yun specializes in bringing down. The confrontation began, as these things do, with a small cruelty. Teddy Jean was showing off, practicing his kicks, playing the fool for his followers. "Check out my perfect mailman cross," he crowed, and kicked a bucket of water. Splash! Whap! The water flew, and it soaked a backpack, Gray Yun's backpack. "It's all wet," someone noticed. And here Teddy Jean, caught in his own carelessness, did what cowards and sadists always do, he lied and deflected. "Did you do this?" Gray demanded. "No, no. It wasn't me," Teddy sneered, pointing elsewhere. "Those guys up there." Refusing responsibility, twisting the situation, daring Gray to make something of it. And the terrified punching bag kid panicked in the background, caught once again between forces bigger than himself. "Forget my homework," he thought, "what am I gonna do about Gray's backpack?" But Gray Yun does not back down from cruelty, and Teddy Jean, sensing a target, escalated. "Got a problem," he taunted. "Spit it out, puss boy. I already told you that I'd kill you if you got on my nerves." It was the same empty threat every bully throws, the same casual promise of violence meant to make a weaker person cower. But Gray Yun was not cowering. He was studying. He was reading Teddy Jean the way he reads everything, cataloging the cruelty, the arrogance, the underestimation, filing it all away for the confrontation to come. "Go ahead and bring your ass up here," Teddy Jean challenged, confident, arrogant, certain that this scrawny kid would either flinch or be crushed. "I haven't even started yet," he taunted. "What's wrong? Go right now." He was inviting Gray into his game, sure that he held all the power, sure that Gray Yun was just another fun target to break. If that's the case, Teddy grinned, savoring what he thought would be an easy domination. And this is the beautiful setup that weak hero has been building toward. Because Teddy Jean has made the exact same mistake as Colton Choi, as Ben Park, as Helmet, as every fighter who ever looked at Gray Yun and saw only his size. He thinks Gray is prey. He thinks the fun is in slowly breaking a helpless boy. He has no idea that the small quiet kid he's decided to torment has beaten crews that outnumbered him, terrified grown fighters into trembling wrecks, and toppled the entire hierarchy of Unjang Hai through nothing but preparation and an unbreakable will. Teddy Jean sees a toy. He's actually poked the most dangerous student in the school. That is the tragedy and the poetry of Gray Yun's whole existence. His weakness is his disguise. His small frame, his quiet manner, his bookish stillness, all of it makes predators like Teddy Jean lower their guard, approach carelessly, treat him as a plaything. And every single time, they learn too late that the plaything has teeth. Teddy Jean wanted to break Gray's spirit slowly, for sport. He was about to discover that Gray Yun's spirit was forged in a trauma deeper than anything Teddy could inflict, hardened by a vow to never lose, sharpened by relentless preparation. Gray Yun had found a friend in Stephen On, a rare warm connection in a cold world. Alex So had vanished, broken by his own beating. And now Teddy Jean, the sadist who tortures for pleasure, had marked Gray as his next slow, delicious target, soaking his bag, taunting him, inviting him into a game the monster was certain he'd win. But Gray Yun does not play games he hasn't already studied. The confrontation was set. The sadist grinned, sure of his dominance. And the weak hero, calm and prepared as always, stood ready to teach one more predator the oldest lesson of Unjang Hai: never mistake the weakest-looking person in the room for the weakest. His story was only getting started, and Teddy Jin's slow torment was about to backfire in the worst possible way. Teddy Jean was doing everything he could to provoke Gray Yun into a fight. Taunting him, soaking his bag, mocking him in front of everyone. And Gray, whose whole body was screaming to strike back, did something that took more strength than any punch. He walked away. Because this episode reveals the single most important rule in Gray Yun's entire philosophy: he only starts a fight he knows he can win. The provocation was relentless. "Go ahead and bring your ass up here," Teddy Jean taunted, certain the scrawny kid would either flinch or fall. And every instinct in Gray Yun wanted to answer. "My heart wants to fight," he admitted to himself. Thump. Thump. Beat, fear, and rage filed inside of me. Because Gray is not a passive person. He despises cruelty, he burns to crush arrogance, and standing there taking Teddy Jin's abuse cost him something real. What I'd like to do, he thought, is run up there right now and crush that arrogant face of his. The desire was there, hot and immediate. But desire is not the same as wisdom, and Gray Yun knows the difference. Because Gray had studied the situation, the way he studies everything, and he saw what a hotter head would have missed. Ever since Philip Kim got tangled in all this, he reasoned, Teddy Jin seems to be another piece of his scheme. This wasn't a simple bully picking a fight. This was bait. Teddy Jin was a piece on a larger board, and the fight he was offering was a trap. It's reckless to charge at an enemy that's already ready and in position, Gray understood. Teddy Jin is aware of this, and is baiting me into a disadvantageous fight. To strike now, in anger, on Teddy Jin's terms, would be to walk straight into the enemy's plan. And Gray Yun does not do that. So he made the hardest choice a fighter can make. If I choose to act now, he thought, this isn't the right time. Grit. And then came the line that defines him. I only start a winning fight. Not a fight he wants. Not a fight his pride demands. A fight he can win. Because Gray Yun's entire method, the thing that separates him from every hot-headed brawler in this story, is that he refuses to let emotion drag him into a losing position. The choice must be made using hard reason exclusively, he told himself, without any petty emotions considered. It is a cold, disciplined, almost inhuman restraint, and it is exactly why he keeps winning when stronger people lose. Think about what that restraint actually requires. Teddy Jin, a sadist, is standing above him, mocking him, daring him, treating him like prey in front of an audience. Every fiber of Gray's being wants to answer the challenge. And he swallows it. He lets Teddy Jin think he's scared. Would you look at that, Teddy crowed, he's playing out scared, helpless, he. Well, that was boring. To everyone watching, Gray Yun looked like a coward who backed down. And Gray let them think it, because he understood something they didn't, that walking away from a rigged fight is not weakness. It's strategy. The strong fool charges when provoked. The wise fighter chooses his moment. Gray Yun was choosing his moment, and it was not this one. This is such a crucial lesson, and it's why Gray Yun is more than just a good fighter. Because most action heroes win by being brave, by charging in, by refusing to back down. Gray Yun wins by being disciplined, by knowing when not to fight, by refusing to let his enemies choose the battlefield. He studies ahead. He reads the trap. And he waits, patiently, for the situation to shift in his favor. It takes far more courage to endure humiliation while plotting than it does to lash out and feel good for a second. Gray Yun has that courage. He absorbs the insults, the taunts, the soaked bag, all of it, because he is playing a longer game than his enemies can see. And even in the middle of that cold calculation, his compassion showed. Because the punching bag kid, Eugene, the boy Teddy had forced to mark Gray, was terrified he'd caused all this. Sorry about your backpack, Eugene stammered. I should have stopped them. And Gray, who could have blamed him, who could have been cold, was gentle instead. Eugene, he said. There's no need to apologize. I'm fine. He called the boy by his name, and for Eugene, that small recognition meant everything. This is the first time Gray has called me by my name, Eugene thought, moved. Because Gray Yun draws a clear line, his patience with Teddy Jin was strategy, but his kindness to Eugene was genuine. He hates the predator. He protects the victim. And he refuses to let a coerced boy carry guilt that belongs to the monster who forced him. But Teddy Jin was not satisfied with a target who wouldn't play his game. And so his cruelty escalated. The rather indirect methods of bullying that Teddy Jean was enjoying, the narration tells us, became more and more frequent. Eventually, he quit being indirect about it altogether. Because a sadist who can't get a reaction only pushes harder, and Teddy Jean pushed all the way. He went after the one thing Gray couldn't ignore. He took Gray's bag. A guy from Class 5 took it, someone reported when Gray's bag went missing. And Teddy Jean, gleeful, had thrown it out the window, into the pouring rain. That fucking loser, he sneered. Does he even know what kind of bag that is? Boom. Boom. He destroyed it, dumped it, ruined it, and dared Gray to do something about it. You're way out of line, you fucker, someone said. I'll kill you. The provocation had gone from petty to deliberate, from soaking a backpack to throwing it into the storm, each escalation designed to break Gray's restraint and drag him into the fight Teddy wanted. And Gray Yun, in the rain, went to retrieve his ruined bag. You've finally lost it, haven't you? Teddy Jean taunted as Gray stepped out into the storm. You shit bag. Grit. Grit. The rain poured down, soaking Gray as he walked to reclaim what Teddy had destroyed, and the sadist watched, delighted, certain he was finally breaking the boy. You here for your bag, he mocked. It was a moment of pure cruelty, a monster savoring the small misery of a person he'd decided to torment. But here is what Teddy Jean still doesn't understand, and what makes this slow build so satisfying. Gray Yun's restraint is not surrender. Every insult, every soaked bag, every humiliation, Gray is absorbing it, studying it, waiting. He only starts a winning fight, and he has not started this one yet, which means he has not decided it can be won yet. But the moment he does, the moment the situation shifts, the moment the trap becomes an opportunity, Teddy Jean will discover that all his slow torment did nothing but sharpen the patience of the most dangerous student in the school. The bag in the rain is not Gray Yun's defeat. It's Teddy Jean's mistake, pushing a calculating enemy closer and closer to the moment he decides to strike. Gray Yun stood in the pouring rain, soaked and humiliated, reaching for a bag a sadist had thrown away, and he did not break. He endured. Because he had made the hardest choice a fighter can make, to swallow his rage, to reject the bait, to walk away from a rigged fight and wait for one he could win. He only starts a winning fight. That discipline, that cold patient wisdom, is the true weapon of the weak hero, more dangerous than any fist. Teddy Jean thought he was breaking Gray Yun. He was actually just teaching himself, slowly and cruelly, why no one should ever mistake Gray's patience for weakness. The storm was rising, the provocations mounting, and somewhere in that rain, Gray Yun was still studying, still waiting, still calculating the exact moment when the winning fight would finally arrive. His story was only getting started. Teddy Jean had spent days tormenting Gray Yun, certain he was slowly breaking the scrawny boy who wouldn't fight back. He thought Gray's patience was fear. He thought his restraint was weakness. And in this episode, he finally learns the truth, in the most brutal way possible. Because Gray Yun wasn't afraid. He was waiting. And to defeat a demon like Teddy Jean, Gray was willing to become an even crueler one himself. It began in the rain, with Gray retrieving his ruined bag while Teddy Jean mocked him. You've finally lost it, haven't you? Teddy sneered. You little shit bag. All this over a backpack. Pathetic. To Teddy, this was the final humiliation, proof that Gray was just another victim who would grovel in the storm for a soaked bag. But as Gray stood there, soaked and silent, he was doing what he always does. He was reading his enemy, seeing him clearly, understanding exactly what Teddy Jean was. And what Gray saw was not a demon at all. I think I know it now, he realized. Whether it be for Philip Kim, or whatever he wants in the end, Teddy Jean is nothing more than a delusional high school brat. That was the truth beneath the sadism. Teddy Jean wasn't some untouchable monster. He was a pawn, a boy desperately trying to impress Philip Kim, putting all his faith in big names and borrowed power, tormenting others to feel important. He beat his teacher, drove kids out of school, played his cruel games, and underneath it all he was just a scared, delusional brat clinging to the reputation of people stronger than him. Gray had seen this kind of person before. And he knew exactly how to bring them down. Because Teddy Jean had made the fatal mistake. He'd pushed past the line. He'd taken Gray's bag, thrown it in the rain, dared him over and over, and finally the situation had shifted. This was no longer Teddy's rigged fight on Teddy's terms. This was the moment Gray had been waiting for, the winning fight, and Gray Yun does not miss his moment. When Teddy came at him, Gray answered. And here is where weak hero shows what makes Gray Yun so terrifying, and so different from an ordinary hero. Because Gray is small. He cannot win a straight fight against a bigger, stronger opponent. So he doesn't fight straight. He turned his own soaked clothing into a weapon, whipping it, looping it, using it to bind and strike. Hoo! Pow! Bam! 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 He wrapped it around Teddy Jean like a snare, yanked him off balance, and rained down blows with anything he could reach. Hawk! Clank! Fwhip! Shoo! Whack! It was ugly, improvised, ruthless, a smaller boy using every dirty trick and every ounce of preparation to dismantle a larger one. Get these off of me, Teddy screamed, tangled and helpless, as the fight he'd been so eager to start turned against him. And the narration gives us the dark heart of the moment, the line that defines this whole confrontation. In order to face a demon like Teddy Jean, Gray thought, I must become an even crueler demon myself. This is the cost of Gray Yun's path, and weak hero does not shy away from it. Teddy Jean is cruel. He hurts people for pleasure. And to defeat him, Gray cannot be gentle. He has to be worse. He has to be more ruthless, more brutal, more willing to do whatever it takes. There is no clean victory against a monster like Teddy Jean. There is only becoming a bigger monster in the moment of the fight. And Gray Yun, who carries his own darkness, is willing to pay that price. This is what separates Gray from a simple action hero. He doesn't win because he's righteous. He wins because he's willing to go further than his enemies, to be crueler than the cruel, to reach into the same darkness they live in and use it better than they can. It's not pretty. It's not noble in the way we usually mean. But it's honest about what surviving a world like this actually requires. To beat a demon, you have to be willing to become one, at least for as long as the fight lasts. And Gray Yun has made that choice again and again, because the alternative, letting the demons win, is worse. Shoo! Crack! Flop! Teddy Jean went down. The sadist who had tormented Gray for days, who had thought he was slowly breaking a helpless boy, was on the ground, beaten by the very target he'd underestimated. KRR, crew. And as he fell, Gray understood the lesson at the heart of it. For idiots who put too much trust into big names, he thought, this is what happens. Teddy Jean had built his whole identity on borrowed power, on the reputation of Philip Kim and the Union and the fighters above him. He'd never had real strength of his own, only the delusion that big names would protect him. And when he finally faced someone who didn't care about names, who had studied him, who was willing to become crueler than he was, all that borrowed power meant nothing. It connects back to everything weak hero has been building. Remember Helmet, from earlier, the delinquent who trembled at the memory of Gray? Remember Colton, broken and subservient? Remember Ben Park, humiliated in front of a whole class? Every one of them made the same mistake Teddy Jean made, they saw a small, quiet, weak-looking boy and assumed he was prey. And every one of them learned that Gray Yun's weakness was a mask, that beneath it was a mind that studies ahead, a will that never breaks, and a willingness to become a demon to beat a demon. Teddy Jean was just the latest to learn it. And when it was over, Gray Yun did something small and human that undercut all the darkness. He retrieved his bag. "I got all wet out there, in this damn rain," he muttered, soaked to the bone, exhausted. Teddy Jean is just too much when he acts crazy like that. Because for all the ruthlessness of the fight, Gray hadn't wanted any of it. He hadn't sought out Teddy Jean. He'd endured days of torment trying to avoid exactly this. He'd only fought when Teddy pushed him past every limit, and even then, he'd done it not for glory but to reclaim what was his and to stop the cruelty. The demon he became in the fight was a tool, not his true self. His true self was a tired boy in the rain, holding a ruined backpack, wishing he could have just been left alone. That is the tragedy woven through every one of Gray Yun's victories. He wins, but he never celebrates. He beats the monsters, but only by touching the monster inside himself. He wants peace, and the world keeps forcing him into war. And each time, he pays a price, becoming a little crueler, a little more willing to go to the dark places, all to survive a world that will not let a strong person rest. Teddy Jean thought he was breaking Gray Yun. Instead, he forced Gray to prove, one more time, exactly how dangerous a cornered, prepared, ruthless weak hero could be. Teddy Jean lay defeated in the rain, the delusional brat who put his faith in big names brought low by the boy he tried to break for fun. Gray Yun stood over him, soaked and weary, having done the one thing that always works, become crueler than the cruel, if only for the length of a fight. He had seen through Teddy's borrowed power, waited for his winning moment, and struck without mercy. And then he'd picked up his ruined bag and wished, as he always does, that none of it had been necessary. The sadist was beaten. But the schemer behind him, Philip Kim, still waited in the shadows, and the war for Unjiang was far from over. Gray Yun had won another fight he never wanted. His story was only getting started, and the darkness he kept reaching into to survive was a weight he would carry every step of the way. Gray Yun had just defeated Teddy Jean, and the way he did it was pure poetic justice. But this episode reveals something far more moving than a victory. Because someone was watching Gray closely, and they saw a secret that Gray had hidden from everyone, that even as he crushed a demon, his own hands were shaking with fear. And that discovery would change a frightened boy's life. First, the justice. Because when Teddy Jean and his crew were found in the aftermath, they were beaten, paralyzed with trauma, and marked with an X. The very same X that Teddy had tried to force onto Gray's back. What happened here? Someone gasped, finding them. How did we end up completely paralyzed like this? Gray Yun had turned Teddy's own cruelty back on him, branding the sadist with the mark he'd meant for his victim. It's a perfect, brutal symmetry, the predator wearing the tag he'd made for his prey. And the defeat broke something deeper in Teddy Jean than his body. Because to Teddy Jean, his belief in the Yangdungpo Union, his faith in Philip Kim and the big names above him, had been almost religious. It was the foundation of his whole identity. And Gray Yun had shattered it. The news that a boy connected to the Union could be defeated so completely instilled anxiety and fear in Teddy Jean. The physical trauma paralyzed his body, but the psychological trauma was worse. The delusional brat who had put all his trust in borrowed power had learned that the power was borrowed, and that it could not save him. His voice, when he finally spoke, was hollow. And Gray Yun, cold as ice, simply told him, "Take this spot and get out of here." Gray's reputation solidified into legend. "He's a demon," people whispered, watching what he'd done to Teddy Jean. Because to so completely break a fighter's will, to make a cruel narcissist like Teddy Jean lose all desire to fight, seemed almost supernatural. "He is indeed a demon," they said. And the phrase that had followed Gray from the beginning grew stronger. Like always, they murmured, Gray Yun never loses. Never loses. It was becoming his myth, the small quiet boy who could not be beaten, the demon who wore the face of a victim. But here is where weak hero does something extraordinary, something that transforms Gray from a fearsome legend into a deeply human hero. Because one person had watched the fight closely. Eugene, the boy Teddy had forced to mark Gray, had seen everything. And what he saw was not just ruthlessness. He saw the truth hidden underneath it. Behind the ruthless and terrifying acts, Eugene realized, Gray tried to keep a straight face. And then the detail that changes everything. I saw his two hands, he thought, shaking. Trembling. Trembling. Gray Yun was afraid. Even as he became a demon to beat a demon, even as he marked Teddy Jean with his own cruel X, even as he won, his hands were shaking. He was scared. He had always been scared. The calm, cold, unbreakable weak hero who terrified everyone was, underneath it all, a frightened boy forcing himself to act despite his fear. He wasn't fearless. He was something braver than fearless, he was afraid, and he did it anyway. This is the heart of what makes Gray Yun so inspiring, and weak hero understands it perfectly. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear, the shaking hands, the pounding heart, and choosing to act regardless. Gray Yun is not brave because he doesn't feel afraid. He's brave because he feels the same terror everyone else feels, and he refuses to let it control him. He studies ahead precisely because he's afraid. He prepares relentlessly because he knows how it feels to be helpless. His whole method is the response of a frightened boy who decided that fear would not be the thing that defeated him. And for Eugene, watching those shaking hands changed his entire understanding of the world. Because Eugene had lived his whole life in fear, letting bullies like Teddy Jean control him, obeying, submitting, telling himself he had no choice. And he had always assumed that people like Gray Yun were simply built different, born without fear, naturally fearless. But now he saw the truth, Gray was afraid too. His hands shook just like Eugene's would have. The difference was not that Gray felt no fear. The difference was that Gray faced his harsh reality head-on, while Eugene had spent his life running from his. Compared to Gray, Eugene thought, who went face to face with his own harsh reality, I've lived in fear without trying to better my situation. And that realization made me feel so pathetic. It's a devastating and beautiful moment of self-awareness. Eugene realizes that his passivity, his endless submission, was never because he was more afraid than Gray. It was because he gave in to the fear, while Gray fought through it. Gray's shaking hands were not a sign of weakness. They were proof of how much courage it actually took to do what he did. And in seeing that, Eugene found something he'd never had, the understanding that he, too, could choose to act despite his fear. That fear is not a life sentence. That even a trembling, frightened person can decide to face their reality instead of fleeing it. This is why Gray Yun is called the weak hero, and why the title is so perfect. He is weak, physically. He is afraid, emotionally. He is not a superhuman fighter who feels nothing. He is an ordinary, scared, small boy who does extraordinary things precisely because he refuses to let his weakness and his fear define him. And in doing so, without ever meaning to, he becomes an inspiration, showing frightened people like Eugene that the shaking hands are not the end of the story, that courage is a choice available to anyone willing to make it. Meanwhile, the larger web kept moving. Ben Park finally reached Alex So, who'd vanished after his beating, recovering somewhere out of sight. "Dude, where are you?" Ben demanded. And Alex, evasive as always, deflected. "Something came up, so I had to make a trip somewhere," he said. But he promised to be back at school soon, and Ben, worried underneath his gruffness, was simply happy his friend was okay. Even the hardened fighters, it turns out, care about each other in their clumsy, defensive ways. But the most important thread was the one closing around Gray. Because someone had recorded the fight. A video of Gray Yun dismantling Teddy Jean was spreading, passed from phone to phone, and the reactions were awe and fear. "This has gotta be up there with the most ruthless I've ever seen," someone marveled. Gray Yun in the real deal. And the video kept spreading, until it reached exactly the person Gray least needed watching him, Philip Kim. "Give me that," Philip said, taking the phone. Because the manipulator, the rich schemer who fights with money and never risks himself, was now studying Gray Yun the same way Gray studies everyone. The video of Gray's brutal victory had put him directly on Philip Kim's radar, and Philip Kim does not forget a threat, or an opportunity. Gray Yun had won. He defeated the sadist, marked him with his own cruelty, shattered his faith in borrowed power, and cemented his legend as the boy who never loses. But the real triumph of this episode was quieter and more human, the revelation that Gray's strength was never the absence of fear, but the courage to act with shaking hands. That truth inspired a frightened boy to reconsider his whole life. And it reminds us that the weak hero is not a fearless warrior, but a scared kid who chose, again and again, to face his reality instead of running from it. Now the video was spreading, Philip Kim was watching, and the schemer's cold attention had found its way to Gray at last. The war for Unjang was entering a new phase, one that would pit the boy who fights with courage against the man who fights with money. Gray Yun's story was only getting started, and his shaking hands, it turned out, were the bravest thing about him. Gray Yun had beaten every fighter and every sadist thrown at him. But Philip Kim was a different kind of enemy, one who never throws a punch, never takes a risk, and never gets his hands dirty. He fights with a weapon far crueler than fists, psychological torture, designed to break a person's spirit slowly, until they beg for mercy at his feet. And in this episode, Gray Yun realizes that to end the cycle of violence, he has to pull this new evil out by the root. It started with Philip Kim watching the video. The footage of Gray dismantling Teddy Jean had reached him, and Philip was not pleased. "Where's Jean?" he demanded, learning that his pawn had been beaten and pushed out. "That motherfucker got busted up by a bitch," someone reported. Because Teddy Jean, nicknamed Frankenstein for the knife scar on his neck, had been Philip's tool. "I thought Teddy Jean was the type to be easily controlled," Philip reflected. But it turns out he's the exact opposite, out of control. He'd expected Teddy to take care of Gray Yun for him. Instead, Teddy had failed spectacularly, and now the video showed the whole district exactly how dangerous Gray really was. "What the hell is up with this fucker?" Philip thought, studying the footage. From the performance to its impact, this is the sort of show someone who deserves to be idolized puts on. But Philip Kim was not afraid. He was calculating. Because Philip's whole philosophy was that no one, no matter how strong, could withstand the long game. "Have I ever failed to get anything I wanted?" he thought. "Everybody's a gangster until they're outnumbered. And I've never seen anyone who didn't fall to the long game." He'd even noticed Gray's cleverness in the video. He used his bag as a hostage, Philip observed of Gray's tactics. Not bad. But to Philip, that just made Gray a more interesting target. "I can just keep trying him," he thought, throwing new pawns at him again and again. This is the terrifying logic of Philip Kim. He doesn't need to beat Gray in a fight. He just needs an endless supply of pawns to wear him down. And then Philip revealed his true weapon, the thing that makes him the most sinister enemy in the series so far. In order to continuously harass the enemy until they finally give in, he thought, an infinite loop. "I'll make sure to burn it into your brain what psychological torture is, until you come begging for forgiveness at my feet." Because Philip Kim does not fight bodies. He fights minds. His plan was to torment Gray relentlessly, wave after wave, humiliation after humiliation, until Gray's spirit simply broke. Don't you think your anger would eventually crumble into hopelessness, Philip mused, if the same thing happened to you over and over again? He understood a cruel truth, that you can beat a person without ever touching them, that endless harassment can break a spirit that no single punch could. And the beauty of it, for Philip, was that he never had to risk himself. There's no reason to get my own hands dirty, he thought. This is what makes Philip Kim so much more dangerous than every villain before him. Colton was a brute. Teddy Jean was a sadist. But they fought Gray directly, and Gray could beat them directly. Philip Kim fights from a safe distance, through money and pawns and psychological warfare, attacking not Gray's body but his will to keep going. You cannot punch a scheme. You cannot outfight a man who never fights. Philip Kim represents a threat that Gray's strength and preparation may not be enough to overcome, an enemy who has weaponized the one thing Gray can't simply defeat with his fists, the slow, grinding erosion of hope. Meanwhile, the story checked in on Alex So, who had finally returned to school. His friends welcomed him back, but they'd learned the truth about where he'd been. It was Jimmy Bay, wasn't it? Gerard Jean realized, piecing together that Alex had been badly beaten. Alex had told everyone to keep quiet, to protect them from worrying, but word had spread. And Alex, for the first time, was done hiding. That maniac Jimmy Bay, he thought, and the whole union behind him. I can't stand it anymore. I can't just keep looking over my shoulder for the next 3 years worrying about them. Because Alex So, like Gray, had reached his breaking point with living in fear. The union, Jimmy Bay, the endless intimidation, he was tired of shrinking from it. He's only unbeatable because we're afraid of him, Alex reasoned. Then I guess I should get ready for that. It's the same realization Eugene had, the same lesson Gray embodies, that the strong only rule as long as the weak agree to be afraid. But the heart of this episode was Gray Yun's own realization, the turning point that would define everything to come. Because Philip Kim had begun his psychological torture. His goons stole Gray's bag again, and lured him toward the incinerator at the rear gate, another humiliation, another pawn, another turn of the infinite loop Philip had promised. And Gray, standing there, understood exactly what was happening, and exactly what it meant. Philip Kim and his goons took off with it, someone noted. And Gray saw the whole shape of it, the endless harassment, the pawns, the scheme designed to grind him down forever. And so Gray Yun made a decision that changed the nature of his war. Because he understood that defeating pawns would never end it. Teddy Jean was gone, and here was Philip Kim already sending the next wave. Beat these goons, and Philip would send more. Endure this humiliation, and there would be another tomorrow. The evil at Unjang was not the pawns. It was the hand that moved them. Here at Unjang, Gray realized, nothing will change. Unless I completely pluck Philip Kim out by the root and destroy him, it would mean nothing, not again. Pluck the root. That is the shift. Because until now, Gray Yun has been reactive, defending himself, beating the fighters who came at him, enduring the schemes thrown his way. He fought because he was attacked. But now he understands that reacting is a trap. As long as Philip Kim sits safely at the center of the web, pulling strings, sending pawns, the harassment will never end. The only way to stop it is to go after the source, to destroy the schemer himself, to pull the evil out by the root. It's a declaration of intent, a shift from defense to offense, and it sets the course for the war ahead. Grit, the panel reads, as Gray steels himself. He will not spend 3 years looking over his shoulder. He will end it. This is the beautiful parallel weak hero draws between Gray and Alex So in this episode. Both have reached the same conclusion at the same time. Both are done living in fear. Both understand that the strong only dominate as long as you let them, and that the only way to be free is to stop enduring and start fighting back at the source. Alex So sets his sights on Jimmy Bay. Gray Yun sets his sights on Philip Kim. Two boys, worn down by a world of predators, deciding that they would rather risk everything than spend their lives afraid. Philip Kim thought he had the perfect plan. An infinite loop of psychological torture, pawns thrown at Gray forever, a spirit ground down until it broke, all without ever risking his own precious hands. He believed no one could withstand the long game. But he had made one crucial miscalculation. He assumed Gray Yun would keep reacting, keep defending, keep enduring, until he broke. He never imagined that Gray would decide to skip all of that and come straight for him, to pull the root out of the ground and destroy the source of the evil entirely. Gray Yun was done playing defense. The schemer wanted an infinite loop of torment. The weak hero was about to break the loop by going after the one who spun it. His story was only getting started, and the war for Unjiang had just found its true final target, not a fighter, not a sadist, but the cold manipulator pulling every string. Gray Yun was coming for Philip Kim. Gray Yun had decided to go after the root of all the evil at Unjiang, Philip Kim himself. And in this final episode of the arc, the courage that Gray carries quietly, the willingness to act with shaking hands, spreads to the people around him. Because a frightened boy chooses to stand beside him, a broken fighter reclaims his fire, and the whole story converges on a single confrontation. This is where the war for Unjiang truly begins. It started with Eugene, and it was one of the most moving beats in the whole arc. Because Eugene, the boy who had lived his entire life in fear, who had been forced to mark Gray as a target, who had watched Gray fight with shaking hands and realized his own cowardice, made a choice. Gray was heading to confront Philip Kim, and Eugene ran after him. "I'll go with you," he said. And Gray, trying to protect him, refused. "You'll only hold me back," he said. "This is my business. Stay out of it." But Eugene would not stay out of it. "But there's no way I can just act like nothing's happening," he insisted. "Even if we're together, I'll be by your side." And here is the beautiful part. Eugene was terrified. His hands were shaking, just like Gray's had. "I am scared," he admitted to himself. "Trembling. Trembling. How am I supposed to turn my back after seeing you like that?" He had learned the lesson that Gray embodies, that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Gray had shown him that a scared person can still choose to face their reality. And now Eugene, scared out of his mind, chose to walk into danger anyway, to stand beside the one person who had shown him what bravery actually looks like. It's the payoff of the shaking hands revelation: courage is contagious. Gray Yun, without ever trying to, had taught a frightened boy how to be brave. This is one of the quiet themes at the heart of Weak Hero. Gray doesn't just win fights. He changes the people around him. He inspires them. Eugene was a passive victim, a boy who obeyed and cowered and told himself he had no choice. And watching Gray, he became someone willing to stand up, to face his fear, to refuse to be a bystander. That transformation, from coward to comrade, is as important as any victory, because it shows that Gray's strength is not just physical. It's the kind of strength that spreads. Meanwhile, the other fighters were converging. Because Philip Kim's grand scheme was in motion, and he had gathered all his targets at once. Alex So and Ben Park realized that Jimmy Bay had lured them, along with Gerard Jean, toward the incinerator. "That son of a bitch Jimmy Bay," Alex seethed. "Let's go." And they rushed toward the confrontation, because Alex so, like Gray, was done running. The fighter who had been broken by a beating a year ago, who had spent his days flinching from the Union, was ready to face his fear head-on. And at the incinerator, Philip Kim waited, revealing the full scope of his cold scheme. He had Gray's bag. He recognized Gray as the one who beat Helmet, the infamous psycho freak, and he decided to deal with everyone at once. Perfect, he thought. I was getting quite curious anyway. I told Helmet to go crush him, and that coward ended up going into hiding. So I thought I'd group them all up to be dealt with today. This was Philip Kim's masterstroke: gather all the threats, all the fighters, all the targets, and eliminate them in a single coordinated move, using pawns and money, never risking his own hands. Walking wallet, someone called him, and it fit. Philip Kim buys people, buys violence, buys outcomes, and stays clean while others bleed. But Philip Kim's carefully arranged plan was about to collide with something he couldn't control: people who had decided to stop being afraid. Because Alex so finally snapped. Cornered, provoked, mocked one time too many, the broken fighter reclaimed his fire. "I've really wanted to sock you in the face since the underpass," he thought of Jimmy Bay. "Fuck it, I can't take this anymore." Thwack. Slam. And he struck, throwing himself at the monster who had haunted him, no longer flinching, no longer shrinking, finally fighting back. It's the same arc as Eugene, as Gray himself, a person worn down by fear reaching the moment where they decide that fighting back, whatever it costs, is better than living afraid. And then, the climax the whole arc had been building toward. Because through it all, one figure was running, footsteps pounding, closing in on the confrontation. Thump. Thump. Ta-da-da. Thump. The rhythm built, relentless, unstoppable. And Gray Yun arrived. The small quiet boy who studies ahead, who only starts a winning fight, who fights with shaking hands and refuses to lose, walked into Philip Kim's carefully arranged trap, not as a victim to be broken, but as the one thing Philip never planned for: a hunter coming for the root of the evil. This is the perfect place for the arc to crest. Because everything Weak Hero has built across these episodes converges here. Philip Kim, the schemer who fights with money and never dirties his hands, thought he was orchestrating a perfect elimination, grouping his targets to be dealt with all at once. He believed no one could withstand his long game, his psychological torture, his endless pawns. But he made the fatal miscalculation of every villain before him. He assumed his enemies would keep reacting, keep enduring, keep breaking. He never imagined they would stop being afraid, that Eugene would find courage, that Alex so would reclaim his fire, that Gray Yun would skip the whole game and come straight for the source. And that is the thesis of Weak Hero, delivered in a single converging moment. The strong only rule as long as the weak agree to be afraid. Philip Kim's power, Jimmy Bay's dominance, the whole cruel hierarchy of this world, all of it depends on fear. And in this episode, one by one, the frightened stopped being frightened. Eugene chose to stand beside Gray. Alex so chose to fight Jimmy Bay. And Gray Yun, who was scared too, who has always been scared, chose to walk straight into the lion's den and pull the evil out by the root. Fear was the foundation of Philip Kim's empire, and the foundation was crumbling. Gray Yun stood at the incinerator, facing the manipulator who had schemed to break him, the schemer's plan unraveling as the people he'd counted on to stay afraid found their courage instead. Eugene trembled at his side but did not run. Alex so threw his fists at the monster who had haunted him. And the small quiet Weak Hero, hands shaking, heart pounding, refused to lose one more time. The war for Unjiang Hai had been building through brawlers and sadists and schemers, and now it had arrived at its true confrontation, the boy who fights with courage against the man who fights with money, the hunter who came for the root against the spider at the center of the web. This is where the arc leaves us, on the edge of the showdown that everything has been building toward. Philip Kim thought he held all the cards. He thought fear would win. He thought Gray Yun was just another target to be broken in his infinite loop. He was about to learn what Colton learned, what Helmet learned, what Teddy Jean learned, what every predator who ever underestimated the weak hero learned, that the small, quiet, scared boy in front of him was the most dangerous person he had ever crossed, and that a person who has decided to stop being afraid cannot be broken by fear. Gray Yun had come for the root. And his story, forged in trauma, sharpened by preparation, powered by the courage to act with shaking hands, was only just getting started. The real war for Unjiang Hai was about to begin.